Hey everyone, thanks for learning to play games. My name is Lance, and in today's video I'm going to teach you how to play Gunfight Royale. This is a brand new game from Knuckleduster Miniatures. It is a 2 to 6 player game that takes roughly 30 to 60 minutes to play, and is a competitive game where either all the players are against each other or the players are broken off into teams depending upon the scenario you've chosen to play. So in the game itself, this is the Wild West, and you are playing gunfighters trying to achieve different goals or be the last player standing or team standing. Throughout the game, this is going to continue until one of 3 different conditions is met. Either you are the last player or team standing, you have achieved the goals of the scenario you've chosen to play, or the lone rider has rode off into the sunset. In either case, the game is over, and whichever player has achieved those goals will be the winner of the game. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to play, starting with components, setup, player turns, and endgame conditions. As always, if you find my videos helpful, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. It's one of the easiest ways you can support channels like mine so we can continue to grow, be able to produce this content. If you want to get notified whenever I drop new videos, also give that notification bell a ring, and that'll let you know whenever I'm dropping new videos, as I'm constantly dropping new stuff such as teaching videos, playthroughs, unboxings, Kickstarter coverage, and many other types of videos. So let's go ahead and head to the table, and I'll teach you how to play. There are 3 different types of dice included in the game. The first are custom 6-sided dice, or D6s. These are going to have 2 sides with a 1, 2 sides with a 2, and 2 sides with a 3. Next is a standard D10 with numbers 1 to 10 on it. And finally, there are 2 20-sided dice with numbers 1 to 20 on them. There are 6 different decks of cards you're going to be using throughout the game, and I want to take a closer look at each one of these. The first one is the starting weapons deck, and at the beginning of the game, each player is going to gather 1 or more cards from this deck based on the character they've chosen to play. Each of these cards is going to list the name of that card at the top, along with a number of keywords going across from there. The first one is going to list the type of item or weapon it is. The next one is going to list whether it is a one-handed or two-handed item, which is going to dictate where you're going to place it on your rig. And then the final one is whether it is concealable or not concealable. If it is concealable, you can choose instead to place it in your inventory face down so other players don't know what it is, and then at a later point you'll be able to reveal that item. If it is not concealable, then you will not be able to place it in your inventory face down, though you can still place it in your inventory regularly. With weapons, you're going to also have a range and accuracy chart, along with the number of bullets that weapon has when it starts out, and then any other important instructions or abilities that that item has. The next deck is the Weapons and Items deck, and this is going to contain all kinds of different weapons and items. Each of these cards is going to list the name of that weapon or item at the top, and any keywords for that, such as this one that has shotgun. It's two-handed, and it is not concealable. Next, you'll have an image of the weapon or item, any special rules for that. With weapons, you're going to have a range and accuracy chart, as well as the listing of the amount of ammunition that they have. And some weapons will also have the damage is going to be variable based on range. So you'll have to check your range, and that is going to tell you if you are going to do bonus or negative damage to that. With items, again, they're going to list the name of the item at the top. They're going to list that keyword, and if they are concealable, and their effects. Throughout the game, as players take wounds, they're going to get to draw cards from the Dirty Tricks deck, and this deck is going to provide players with all kinds of abilities or effects that they can play at any time unless the card specifies otherwise. Each of these cards is going to list the name of the card on the top, and then when it can be played, with most of them being able to be played at any time. Next is the ability on the card that you'll carry out when playing that card, and then it'll be discarded to the discard pile. Now, one important note I do want to point out with this is with cards that can be played at any time, that includes during your turn, during enemy turns, or even after your character has died, and can also be used at any time during an action in between, before, or after it. Again, unless the card specifies otherwise. Throughout the game, as players have items thrown at them, are shot, stabbed, or punched, they're going to be required to draw wound cards. Each wound card is going to be double-sided with a black and a blue side. The black side will be resolved if a player is shot, where the blue side will be resolved with punches and thrown items. Each of these sides is going to have 3 pieces of information on it. First, at the top of the card is going to list the amount of damage or variable amount of damage, where you'll have to roll a die to determine the amount of damage you take. Next is the location that you are hit, and then finally in the middle of the card are any effects that you're going to suffer from that, with some of them having variable effects where you have to roll to resolve, and others will simply have a standard effect that is going to come into play. The next deck are scenario cards, and at the beginning of the game you can either choose one of these that you would like to play, or you can randomly deal one of these, and you'll have 3 of them that are going to be team games, and 3 of them that are going to be free-for-alls. Each one is going to list the name of that game, and the different conditions or effects that the players will have to achieve in order to win the game, or any bonuses that the players will receive at the end. And the final deck of cards are the character cards. Each one of these is going to list a bounty, which is also going to determine the player order, with the highest bounty going first, followed by the next, and so on. Each character is also going to have some special abilities, an image and name of that character, and any starting weapons that that character has at the beginning of the game. The final component I want to look at is the board itself, as there's a number of different features on here I want to touch on briefly before getting into the game. I will go into more detail about most of this during the game itself as well. So first off, the board is going to be broken down into squares or spaces that the players are going to be able to move around during the game, and you're also going to have different buildings on this board. Each building is going to have black lines around it, which are going to be that building's walls. No model is able to move through the walls of any building for any reason. Buildings are also going to have orange lines, which are going to be that building's doors, which are going to cost 1 additional movement point to move through. Buildings are also going to have windows, and windows can be moved through, but you have to perform a special climb action in order to do so. The same with some buildings will have counters, which also will have the arrows going both ways, which means that you'll have to spend a climb action to move over those spaces. Some areas of the board are also going to have the dotted lines, which are basically considered difficult terrain and will cause you to spend 1 additional movement point to move through those spaces. You'll also notice on the board there's going to be numbered spaces, where these are going to be random spaces that the players might start at the beginning of the game. And then you'll have question mark spaces. During setup, you're going to be placing tokens on those spaces, and then throughout the game, players can spend an action to pick up those tokens and find out if they found some loot and different things. Another feature is the different things on the board that are going to provide cover. So with any image on the board, it will provide cover if being shot through, such as the watering hole, for example, here or there. The wagon is also going to provide cover, and a lot of the different things inside buildings will provide cover for players. And again, I'll go over more of that later in the video. Then the final feature is the Lone Rider of Eternity. So when one of the players for the first time falls and becomes mortally wounded, which means that they're going to, when you start getting into their red chips, at the end of that round and every round after that, at the end of the round, you're going to be rolling for the Lone Rider of Eternity. You're going to roll 2d3 and move him that number of spaces. If he lands on a space with an effect, you're going to carry out that effect. And if he ever reaches the end of the game board, then the game is over immediately, and you'll consult your scenario to try to figure out who won the game. From there, moving into setup, the first thing you're going to do is place the game board out in the middle of the table. You can also place out all the dice you're going to be using for the game. From there, then go ahead and grab the green weapons and items deck and remove the 2 Yankee Gold cards from it and place those off to the side, unless you've chosen to play a custom scenario. Then go ahead and shuffle up the weapons and items deck and place that out. And also shuffle up the Dirty Tricks and Wounds decks and also place those out. Place the Lone Rider of Eternity token on its starting space on the track. For player setup, each player is going to receive a rig and then will be dealt either a random character or they will choose one if all players can agree and place it in the center of the rig. Next, each player is going to receive 9 health tokens, 3 red and 6 white. The red tokens will count as mortally wounded or about ready to die, and these will be stacked on the player's health stack. Next, each player is going to receive a blue chip, which will be placed on the stun chip section. When a player is stunned, they're going to move that blue chip on top of their character card and will have to spend their next action to remove that chip and add it back to their area. Next, go ahead and grab the miniature that you're going to be using for the game, as well as the token, which you can use as a secondary piece or to mark when your character goes prone or whatnot, if you want to. Now, for this video, just to make things really clear, I am going to be using the tokens instead of the miniatures. And they do come with a octagonal base that you can place on them as well. Each of the different characters in the game will list any starting weapons at the bottom. Go ahead and grab those now. With single hand weapons, they'll be placed in one of your hands. If it's a two-handed weapon, it has to be placed above your board. Alternatively, you can also place them in your inventory, And if it is a concealable weapon, you can also place it in your inventory face down and have an opportunity to reveal it at a later point. Throughout the game, as players take damage, sometimes they will not be able to use one of their hands or will be able to run, and in which those cases you'll place a token over those different spots to signify that that cannot be used. And then if it is healed, you'll simply remove those tokens. Each player will also receive a quick reference guide. Now, one note with player setup, I do like to give each player the different tokens for his disabilities if he needs it. Otherwise, you can simply make a stack of those off to the side if you don't want to have each player have those. That's just something that I find handy. Each player is also going to get a marker, and you can write directly onto the cards as these are dry erase markers, but I prefer to sleeve my cards when I'm writing on them. So again, that is a personal preference for you. From there, then you can grab the wildlife in the far west and shuffle that deck up. Or alternatively, you can simply choose a card you would want to use for this game for your scenario. I'm just going to go ahead and use the standard Gunfight Royale card, and this one is a free-for-all, so everybody is against everybody with this. And then you can place that off to the side and handle any additional setup instructions for it. The rest of the cards can be returned to the box as you're not going to use them for this game. Grab the token with the money symbol on it and place it inside the vault with the money side up. And throughout the game, players will be able to try to break into the vault by rolling 2d3. And if they get the same number on both dice, then they will open that up just like any other door and be able to go in there and collect the money. Next, go ahead and gather the item tokens, and these are dual purpose tokens. So on the back side of each of these tokens, you're going to have either a dropped item or wreckage on it, and on the front side will be the question mark. For setup, you're just going to place all the tokens out with the question mark side up in each one of the spaces with a question mark. And then throughout the game, as you reveal those items and remove those tokens, you'll be able to use those tokens for the other options later on that I will talk about. And then finally, you're going to place each character out on the board, starting with the player that has the highest bounty and working your way down. Each player, in order to be placed on the board, is going to roll the d10, and that will determine where they go. So this player is going to be in place in spot number 2, and then his opponent is going to be in spot 10, so he's over here in the corral. From there, we're ready to begin the game. Gunfight Royale is played over an undefined number of rounds. During each round, each player will get to take a turn, starting with the player that has the highest bounty and working your way down from there. During each player's turn, that player will perform up to 2 actions from a selection of 12 possible actions that are broken into 3 categories: move, attack, and inventory. Once a player has completed taking their actions, it'll pass on to the next player, and this is going to continue until one of the 3 different endgame conditions is met. Either there is one player or team left standing, you have met the conditions for the scenario that you're playing, or the lone rider has reached the end of the game track. In any of those situations, the game will end immediately, and then you'll determine who the winner of the game is. So from here, we're going to move into the game, starting with a player's turn, and I'm going to take you through each one of the different actions that you can perform, starting with the movement actions. The first set of actions I'm going to look at are move actions, and there are 4 different move actions: run, walk, crawl, and climb. Before getting into those actions and the specifics of them, I do want to cover some of the core rules for movement. So first off, with your character, you can move in any direction, both orthogonally and diagonally, with a couple of exceptions. First off, with your character, when performing move actions, if you move into a space that has dotted lines or through dotted lines, or you wish to move through a doorway, it's going to cost you 1 extra movement point to do so. Next, you are never allowed to move through spaces with enemy characters or through walls. You can move through spaces with friendly characters, but you can never end your turn or on a space that has another character. And then finally, with movement itself, if you wish to move through a space that has a wall in it, you must move orthogonally around the wall. I could not choose to move diagonally through a space that has a wall. And same with enemy characters. Again, if I was here, I cannot choose to move into this space moving diagonally through the space that has the enemy character. I must move around orthogonally to get to that space if that's where I want to go. The other important thing I need to talk about is your character's stance, and each character can have 2 possible stances. Normally your character is going to be standing up, but there will be certain times throughout the game that your character will be prone. And based on some of the movement actions, they will require you to be in one stance or the other, and I'll outline these in each one of the actions. The first action I'll look at is a run action. With this action, you must be standing up in order to take it. From there, then you're going to gather up 2 of the yellow D6s, which in this game are classified as D3s, as you're going to have a 1, 2, or 3 on their results, and go ahead and roll those. These will give you the number of movement points that you have. So in my situation here, I've rolled 2 3s, so I'll have 6 movement points that I can spend to move around the board. Now, I don't have to spend all of these points if I don't want to, but I have a maximum of 6. So from here, I want to try to get over to this area here so that I can see through the window and potentially try to take a shot on my fellow player here. So in order to do this, I'm going to go ahead and move 1 diagonally, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to move this way 5. And so at the end of my movement, whatever the last movement was, I have to move and then point in that direction. My little bullet will be pointing in that direction. Since I moved down, then my character has to be facing this direction. At the end of your move action, you can also choose to hit the dirt, which means that you're going to go prone. The other quick example I want to take with this is moving into the building. So with this, whenever you move into or spaces through doors, they are going to cost an additional movement point, and you cannot move diagonally into a door space through a wall. So again, with this, I have to move straight on. So if I had that 6 points, there's 1, 2, 3 to move through there because it costs me 2 extra points, 4, and then 5, 6 to move into that room. Again, I'll be pointing in the direction of my last space that I moved into. The second type of move action is a walk. With this action, again, you must be standing up in order to take it. From there, you're going to roll 1 d3 and move up to that number of spaces. From there, once you've finished your movement, you can point in any direction you want to, and you can also choose again to hit the dirt, which again means to go prone. The third type of move action is a crawl. With this one, you must be prone to start out. Then you can move 1 space in any direction you want to, again facing in any direction once you've completed your move. So if I move here, then I could choose to point in any direction I want to. And at the end of this, I can choose to stand back up if I'm able to. The one exception to that is if you're mortally wounded or have red health chips showing, then you cannot stand up and you must stay prone. And the final type of move action is a climb. Again, with the climb, you must be in a standing position in order to take this. And with this one, it allows you to move over a space that has the pair of arrows, such as a window or obstacle. And with this, you're allowed to move 1 space to the other side of that obstacle or window. And then from there, you can also choose to go prone. And you can face in any direction of your choice. The next set of actions I want to look at are the attack actions. But before covering those, I do want to talk about a couple of important concepts that go along with them. The first is line of sight. So each character is going to have a little bullet which is going to dictate their facing. From there, their line of sight is going to extend 180 degrees in their front arc, as you can see here. Then in order to determine if you have line of sight to a target, you're going to draw an imaginary line from your bullet to the front part of a model's base. As long as that line does not cross a wall or another model, you have line of sight to your target. The first attack action I'll look at is shoot. With this action, there are going to be 10 steps that you're going to do in order. The first one is to choose a gun in one of your hands to shoot with. So my character here is going to be the one taking the shot, and as you can see here, he's going to use his pepper box gun. From there, then you're going to choose your target. So I'm going to go ahead and target the enemy that I have across from me here. And then you're going to check to make sure your facing is correct. So I am facing, I can see him. And as you can see here, my line of sight is true as it comes off and I can draw a line to my target. Next, I'm going to check to make sure there is nothing in the way of my shot. So again, drawing that straight line, it does not cross any other models or walls. So I do have line of sight to my target. The next step is to see if your target is in cover. And there's going to be a number of different types of cover in the game. Any image that is on the board, such as horses or the watering trough or the different fences, that is all going to be considered cover. So anytime you draw your line over any type of image, that will provide cover to the other player. Now, the one exception to that is if you are connected to that cover. For example, with me being behind the horse, this would not count as my opponent receiving cover as I am directly on the opposite side of it. So I'm kind of poking around and taking a shot through that and hitting him. But since my line of sight still crosses over the fence, he would have cover in that situation. Likewise, if I instead placed him over here, and say my guy was over here taking the shot, I would still be drawing over this water trough here, so he would be in cover in that situation as well. And the other type of cover are windows. So when shooting through a window, your opponent will receive cover. From there, you're going to determine the range, and you're going to count a number of spaces to your target. So I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces away from my target. With determining the number of spaces, you will count the shortest number of spaces both orthogonally and diagonally to you. The next step is only going to happen if your target is within 6 spaces, can see you, and is not stunned. In that case, they can choose to issue a challenge if they want to, which I'm going to cover a little bit later in the video. Next, you're going to determine the accuracy and what you're going to need to roll on a d20. First, you're going to check your weapon, and it's going to list the different ranges and its accuracy rating. So with the pepperbox gun, its range, as you can see, 7 to 12, is going to require a 7 or less. So that's not good. Next, you're going to compare or also add any other penalties to that. So as you can see on this accuracy chart here, there's a number of different penalties. If you move during your turn, you're going to receive a negative to the number of spaces you moved. If you're in a challenge, you're going to receive a negative. Your target is behind cover, which he is. So I'm at -2, so I'm down to a 5 at this point. He is not prone and 2 spaces away, so I'm okay there. I did not take an aiming action, which I'll cover in a little bit, which would have given me a bonus. I am not mortally wounded. I'm not shooting with my left hand, and I am not using a two-handed weapon with one-hand disability. So at this point, I need a 5 in order to be successful in hitting him. So let's go ahead and roll and see what I get. And I got a 4, so I do successfully hit him. So there is a couple of important things with the roll. First off, if you happen to roll a 1, if I can find it here, that is a called shot. In that situation, that is a critical success, and you will get to draw 5 wound cards and choose one of the black wounds to give to your target. The other thing is a 20, which is a critical failure. In this situation, you're going to have to roll on the malfunction chart, as you can see here, and roll a d3. And based on your result, there can be some very bad consequences to that. So going back to our example, I had rolled a 4, so I'm going to draw the top wound card from the wound deck. All right, as you can see here, I shot him in the toe. This is going to do 1 wound, so he'll remove 1 token from his wound counter. He's also going to get to draw a dirty trick card for that, and he cannot run at this point. To represent this, you're going to be placing the boot token on your movement slot. At this point, that signifies that you will not be able to run for the rest of the game unless you find some way of being able to remove that token. And the final step of this is to mark 1 bullet off on your weapon card. The second type of attack action is a throw action. For this example, we're going to go ahead and use the hero, and we're going to go ahead and say that his gun ended up jamming up and broke. And so it's pretty much useless other than a bludgeon weapon at this point. So he's going to choose to throw it at the gambler. So the first step in this is to choose the weapon in your hand to throw. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to throw my weapon, my gun. And then you're going to choose your target character that you can see. So the hero has a front facing, so he can see his target. Next, you're going to check the distance to your target. So he is 1, 2, 3 spaces away. From there, if your target is within 6 spaces, has line of sight to you, and is not stunned, he can choose a challenge. Again, I'm going to cover challenges a little bit later, but I am within the backside of my target, so he cannot see me, and so he couldn't challenge me even if he wanted to. From there, I'm going to determine the roll that I need on a d20. First off, I'm going to subtract the distance from 20, so I'm going to need 17 as my distance is 3. Then I'm going to check my accuracy chart, again as you can see here, and subtract any negatives from that. So I did move during this action, and I moved 3 spaces, so that's going to bring it down an additional 3. So that'll drop it down to 14. And other than that, I don't have any other effects, so I'm going to go ahead and roll. And I got a 15, so I was not successful. But let's go ahead and say, for example, that I ended up rolling a 13 instead. So on a hit, you're going to deal a blue wound to your target. So he'll draw a card, and with this one is knee to the jaw. So this one will do D3, and it's 2 wounds to the target. So he's going to remove 2 wound chips, and he'll get to draw a dirty trick card. Now going back to the example, let's go ahead and say that we did end up rolling that 15. So in that situation, it is a miss. So what happens on a miss? So first off, the target gets to choose where the weapon scatters to, up to 2 spaces away from him. So let's go ahead and say that he wished to place that over here. And then you're just simply going to place the weapon item off to the side. Now, if we would have been really unlucky and rolled a 20 with a critical miss, our target would have actually caught the weapon and thrown it back at us, and so would have carried out that same action going through all those steps. The third type of attack action is a brawl. With this example, I'm going to use the hero on the gambler, and the first step of this is to choose a character that is in adjacent space. So I have to choose one character that is within one space of me, so the gambler does meet those criteria. Next, I'm going to choose a weapon in my hand, or I can fight with bare hands. So with our hero, he doesn't have any weapons at this point, so he's going to use his fists to fight. From there, then each player is going to roll 2d3 and add up all of those results. So right now it is a 2 to 4. Now the hero has a special ability that he gets a +1 when brawling, so he would actually be a 5. And then we're also going to check the brawling accuracy chart and subtract anything from there. So each of our heroes each of our characters is fighting unarmed, so each one will lose 1 result on that. Other than that, nobody is prone, nobody is mortally wounded, and there aren't any disabled hand slots, and we're not initiating through cover, and our enemy did see us, so we are not at any bonuses. So from there, whoever has the highest result is going to deal a wound card, a blue wound, to their opponent. So as you can see here, I elbowed the gambler, and he will take 1 damage, and he'll also get to draw a dirty trick card. If there happened to be a tie, then our characters would have to roll again until somebody came out on top. One other important note with brawls is if the winning character has a weapon equipped. For this example, let's take a look at the hatchet. So when resolving that, you're going to follow the instructions on the weapon's card. So the hatchet is going to deal a black wound instead, and it's also going to add +1 damage to whatever that wound does in a brawl situation. The final type of attack action is an aim. With this one, you're simply spending an action to get +2 to your next attack. This can be done multiple times, giving you +2 for each additional aim action you take. And the final set of actions I want to look at are inventory actions, and there are 4 of these as well: loot, reload, weapon swipe, and drop. The first type of action I want to look at is a loot action. With this action, if you are on a space or adjacent to a space that has a token on it, you can choose to perform the loot action, and then depending upon the type of token it is, will dictate what you are going to carry out. Now, if the token was placed at the beginning of the game, then you're simply going to draw the top card of the weapons and items deck. When you draw a weapon or an item, you can choose to immediately swap weapons or items in order to equip this. This is considered part of the loot action. If you are looting another player's body, you can choose to look through their rig, including any concealed cards they have, and choose one of them and add it to your area like before. If you are looting a dropped item, then you're simply going to take the corresponding card and then you'll remove the item token. A reload action will allow you to reload some of the bullets in one of your guns that you have equipped to one of your hands. You also want to look at the gun itself and make sure there aren't any special rules about reloading, as some guns will have some stipulations with them. Otherwise, you're simply going to roll a d3 and then erase that number of bullets that have been marked off. So let's look at an example of this. And so I've gotten 2 bullets back, or reloaded 2 bullets, so I'll remove 2 and I'm ready to go. The switch weapon action allows you to switch a weapon from one hand to another, or remove weapons from one or both hands, adding them back into your inventory and taking cards out of your inventory and placing them in one of your hands. So for example, let's go ahead and say that my player here wishes to equip this Colt revolver rifle, which is a 2-handed weapon. So I have to put the pepper box in the inventory, and then I can place the Colt rifle above into the 2-hand slots. Or likewise, let's go ahead and say instead that with my left hand, it got injured, and so I want to move it over to the right hand, so I'm going to go ahead and shift the pepper box over here. The final action is a drop action, which allows you to remove an item from one of your hands or your inventory and place it in a space adjacent to you. So let's go ahead and say, for example, that with the pepper box, I ran out of bullets and I don't really want to take the actions to reload them. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to drop that item. So I'll place a dropped item token in one of the spaces adjacent to my space or on my space, and then I'll place this card off to the side, where another player could potentially come by and pick that up at a later point. Once you've completed your 2 actions or chosen not to take any further actions, your turn will come to an end and it'll pass to the next player that has the next lowest bounty, until all players have had a turn, at which point then the round will start over with the highest bountied player. This is going to continue until one of the endgame conditions is met. So at this point, now that I've gone through all the different actions of a player's turn, there's a couple of additional things that we need to cover before finishing up. So the first thing I want to look at are challenges. And a challenge is going to be for the defender when they are shot at or thrown at during the other player's turn. So there are a couple of rules with this. So first off, in order to challenge another player, you have to be within 6 spaces of that player when they try to shoot at you or throw something at you. You also have to have been able to have seen them at some point during their turn. So, for example, with this player, if I chose to run with this player down here, at this point I'm behind the player, but I did start where the other player could see me, so this player could still challenge me. The other important thing is that both players must not be stunned. Now, there are going to be situations where the attacker could become stunned before he attacks, and so that is why that is important. But if the defender is stunned at this point, then he will not be able to issue a challenge. So let's go ahead and say, for example, that the gambler wishes to shoot at the hero. And at this point, the hero is going to choose to challenge him, so he's going to turn to face him. And then each player is going to roll a d3 to determine the order in which a challenge is going to be resolved. If you happen to roll a tie, then the attack is going to happen simultaneously. So in this situation, the hero ended up rolling higher, so he's going to get to shoot at the gambler first. You do need to have a weapon in your hand to shoot or throw during a challenge. There is a quick draw rule, so if you do not have a weapon in your hand, but you happen to have a pistol or a keyword pistol item in your inventory, you can immediately equip it to your left or right hand. From here then, our hero would handle his shot action first, going through that sequence that we covered originally. And if, for example, the gambler gets stunned during this, then he would not be able to shoot back, even though it was his attack action that initiated this. At the end of this action, then the hero, since he took a challenge outside of his turn, will become stunned and will place the blue stun token on there, just signifying that he took an action, and so during his turn, the first action is going to be to remove that, so he'll only have one action remaining during his next turn. I also want to cover the vault real quick. So in normal games, the vault door is locked and players are going to have to roll 2d3 and come up with the same result in order to unlock the door. At that point, then the door is considered just like any other door where you would simply move through it, and it'll cost you an extra movement point to do so. Other than that, if a player collects the money, based on the scenario you're playing, sometimes each scenario will dictate other things. Some of them will have you getting that specifically to win the game, and others will allow you to get that and get extra money for it at the end of the game. Alternatively, there's also a wild card that you'll be able to place in your games as an optional rule that will allow you to count it as a wild and will let you take a weapon of your choice from the weapons and items deck. It's simply going through it and picking the card you want. And the final two things I want to cover are Mortally Wounded and the Lone Rider of Eternity. So first off, with a Mortally Wounded, so as players take damage throughout the game, once a player drops below 4 hit points, they're going to reveal their red chips. Once a player reveals the red chips, then they become mortally wounded. They are going to flip their token over to its prone side, and at this point, they will only be able to crawl. They will not be able to walk, run, or climb for the rest of the game unless they're able to bring their health above those red chips again. So at this point also, that is going to trigger the Lone Rider of Eternity. At the end of the round, once all the players have taken their turn, then the Lone Rider of Eternity is going to begin his turn. At this point, for the rest of the game, he will always activate at the end of the round. You're going to roll 2d3 and move him that number of spaces. And then you'll resolve any effects on there. So let's go ahead and say, for example, that he ended up rolling a 5, so he's going to move 5 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then he's going to handle the effect on the space that he lands on, if there is one. So with this one, mortally wounded characters are going to lose 1 health chip. So with the gambler, he would lose another chip, and then you'd continue on taking your turns. Now, if the Lone Rider of Eternity makes it all the way to the ends of the track, the game is going to end immediately, and you'll determine the winner by checking your scenario and seeing if anybody met any conditions on it. Well, I hope you found this video helpful in learning how to play Gunfight Royale. If you have any questions or comments, please post those in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my videos and leave me feedback on them. I do really appreciate it and take into account everything you say to make the best possible videos. And until next time, I'll see you later.